Hello everyone and welcome to another tutorial from Inside Out Records and Stevie R. Today we're gonna talk about a topic that you chose. We got so many requests from people that they want to talk about sidechain, and I understand it is a topic that maybe many of you have seen many tutorials on. However, I strongly believe that and after teaching a lot of people and hearing their conceptions about sidechain, I feel that there's many people that have it wrong in their minds in terms of what it is and in terms of how we can use it. Obviously, it's a very big subject. We can talk about it for far longer than this tutorial, but I will try to give you some basic guidelines and probably, hopefully, a better understanding of what it is. So when we talk about sidechain, essentially we don't mean the bass dating to the kick drum or any of those things. When we talk about sidechain, we talk about a process reacting to an alternative audio source. So this can have a lot of different implementations. Yes, one of them will be the trick that many of you are aware, having the bass to duck when the kick drum comes in order for them to have a more healthy relationship in the mix. So it can also be though many other things. Let's give another example. When we talk about a sidechain filter, let's look at the Shadow Hill mastering compressor, which has in one of the parts of the circuit, it has a 90 Hz, if I'm not mistaken, sidechain filter, a 90 Hz high pass filter. What does this mean? It means that this part of the compressor will actually only react to everything that is from 90 Hz and above on the signal that comes in. So if your mix is going the whole thing through the Shadow Hill compressor, and let's assume that this sidechain filter was taking place in the VCA and not the optical area, then it means that the compression would actually occur according to what the compressor sees from the signal for only what is above 90 Hz of that signal. So that is a sidechain filter. Even if we see one of the most common techniques that many of you use a lot and every day, and you will be surprised how many people actually are doing this for years, and I have seen it with many students, and they're doing it wrong. So that's why I feel that it is a good opportunity here to do sidechain. And again, there are no absolute truths. You can, of course, try something unorthodox and it could work in a particular scenario, because let's remember that when we're working with audio signal, it's a very complex signal, and each of these signals will react differently to the same, probably, effect chain or process. So what might sound not very good on a particular vocal or signal can sound amazing on another. Because then let's not forget how complex the signal is, and the process is doing something on that signal, and probably what we perceive as this sounding good on this signal might not happen. However, another signal, it might be exactly what we are after. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that we are not just doing physics and math in music production, which is important that we also have some good understanding of how it works in the world of maths and physics, but also the final judge is our ear. And that's how you hear in so many places that, there's one rule that there are no rules, which is true to a certain extent. However, are there some rules that we could follow and, some techniques that would work for the majority of the time? Yes. So let's look at a typical example here. I brought some of my recordings that I did for Underground Sounds in my lo-fi analog sessions sample pack. So let's start from working with the very simple kick and bass. Okay, so like this is a very simple example. What I'm going to do now is work with the sidechain in a very traditional manner. So I'm going to use a compressor that is going to take the kick drum as a sidechain source, and we want this to create some space for the kick drum by attenuating, obviously, the level of the bass in a specific manner that we are going to define through the sidechain process. So I'm going to bring in my compressor. I'm going to open the settings here, and from the sidechain I am going to select kick. So many of you are familiar with this process until there. So what I'm going to say, if I start bringing the threshold down, is this moving. So every time the kick drum is playing, the bass is attenuating a little bit to make space for it. However, and I'm not gonna go through all the compressor settings today, we might do another tutorial for that. However, settings that I like to use for this particular scenario, and again, no absolute truths, but I like to go with a high ratio around like everything from 7 to 10. I like a short attack, and again, I have to fine tune it by listening to what's going on. A relatively low knee. But the whole secret, and what many people get wrong, is the release. Usually, what I want with my release on Sidechain is for this to work in a musical and rhythmical manner. Which means that according to my tempo, I would like this movement to be happening either in 8th note, 16th notes, and so on. Again, are there absolute truths? No. Does this work like for many times for me? Yes, it has worked many times for me and for many other people that I know. So what I want to see now, and there are many ways to find that, but a very convenient one would be that we go to Safari. There is this great website called musiccalculator.com, and I want us to go to the delay timing, which is here. And what I'm going to do is set my tempo, which is 121. And I can start from any value. I usually start from 32 notes, and I see what comes up here. So this is around 62. And of course, as you know, 32 notes, 16th notes, and so on. So I can start trying. I can start from one of those values, and I can go halves and doubles to try different timings. So let's go back to my Ableton. So we saw that like one option would be 62. 61.97, we're gonna say 62. And I'm gonna copy that next door, and I'm gonna do here double. So 124. And so would you like one more? Let's do 248. If my math is correct, I think it is. So let's listen to it. Obviously, by working with a threshold, you can make it in a more obvious or less obvious effect. But I want it obvious so you can hear the difference. So this is the movement here. Let's hear it with 124. Much slower, more lazy, different groove. Faster, more aggressive, more pumping effect. Very slow, probably not for this track list. What if we went like, half of 62, so let's go 31. The most aggressive of the three. So between that, as you can see, it's completely different movement. And from the three, I'll be between these two, and then it becomes phased. But can you see how much of a huge difference it makes if I go to 62, or if I go to double, or if I go half of that? So I would start from one value and try halves and doubles to get my release working in a rhythmical manner with my track. Again, there is no rule, you can try whatever you want. However, and I'm all about using looseness and not everything being on time. However, on the sidechain, in this relationship, when I work with my kick and bass, sometimes if I want to have some rhythmical effect going on, I do want this to be musical. I do want this to be in time. And I would urge you to try that. I think between these settings, it will be very, very useful to you. Last but not least, if you don't want to have the movement happening to the whole frequency spectrum, so for example, we have this bass, but we want the mid-high of the bass to not be affected, but only the low frequency to come down when kicks comes in. We could sort this out with a traditional multiband compressor, or I'm gonna show you a little trick that I absolutely adore. There is this little fellow called track spacer, which I'm gonna bring here. And what you do with that is I'm gonna set my kick drum as a sidechain input, and I'm gonna say, you know what? I don't want you to operate on all the frequencies, but I want you to operate only at the low end. So I want to say something, below, like probably 250 or something. So now it sees the blue is the kick drum, and it only attenuates the frequencies that this thinks that are classing. And I've seen some really, really good engineers using that, myself included, and it works really well. So then you can decide, how much of this movement I want, how much attenuation. So I can go from something really subtle to something much more obvious, but obviously probably I want something much more subtle. So now the mid-high is not being affected. We cannot hear an obvious pumping effect like we would be hearing in this example, which we can hear the whole signal having a rhythmical effect, which again we could make it much subtler. So very, very different thing happening there, just controlling the low energy and leaving low the mid-highs, not giving us the perception that the whole signal is being moved and having a rhythmical effect. Now, I want you, and many of you that have been my students already, hopefully are doing that. I want you to start thinking not only sidechain with a kick drum, but how you can create groups of things that are moving with each other. Let me give you an example. Let's add like a little prophet line that I recorded. So this one now, I have a few other things. I have some drums here. So this one now, if it was to move, let's start with the kick drum. With 62, we'll be doing that. One movement. With a 124 release, and let's go up with the ratio. Very different movement. But what if I run it with, my first drums, which is this one? Very different movement. And what if I run it with, I left one empty for us to see something now. So what if I start creating now some groups here? Let's say I'm gonna create a return track, and I'm gonna call it sidechain source 1. And I'm gonna also set that to not go anywhere, we don't want to hear it. And then prefade. Okay, prefader. So now, let's say I want to send my kick drum there, and my clap, and more of the clap. So now, and I'm gonna show you what happens here. This last compression, I'm gonna say audio from SC1. You see now, every time it goes in the clap, it does a very different movement. So like this will be doing that. Let's hear it. So every time the clap comes in, this has a bigger movement. And what if I actually send also, I don't know, probably one other thing in that group? Different movements. So I could create, imagine like a few sidechain groups there, and one could have kick and clap only, the other one could have some of the hats together, the other one could have something else, and you have elements reacting rhythmically to other elements or to other groups of elements. So I want you to take all of those things on board when you're working with sidechain. And again, If you have any questions, we could take this technique like to a 1 hour lecture, but I hope this gives you enough weapons to start thinking sidechain in a new way. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. See you next week.